A very good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 23rd June 2025 and today we have some very important and interesting topics from different newspapers. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed manner so that this discussion will be helpful for your prelims and mains examinations. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's try to understand all these important topics in a very detailed manner. And the first topic with which we're going to start this discussion is about Indian economy amidst the global troubles. And in fact, when we talk about the Indian economy, it is said that India is the fourth largest economy now. And India is also expected to become the third largest economy in the world very soon. However, despite robust economic growth by India, there are a lot of global troubles. So therefore, in this context, how India can actually maintain its economic growth trajectory and how India can continues to develop so that India can achieve the goal of becoming Viksit Bharat by the year 2047. Because we all knew that India wanted to become a developed country by the year 2047. So if India wanted to become a developed country, we should continue to grow, right? So therefore, in this context, we will understand what are the ways through which India can achieve a robust economic growth. India can maintain its economic growth trajectory. And this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper. And this is important for your general studies paper 3 mains examination. So now why in this news? So why it is in news? We'll try to understand the context in a very brief manner. And it is being said that the global economy has been facing a transformative phase. And this transformative phase that we have been observing after Trump elected as the President of United States of America. So we very often see the trade wars. The trade war between US and China. And the tariff revisions, and these tariff revisions, particularly I can call these tariff revisions as aggressive tariff revisions by US President Donald Trump, and the geopolitical tensions. So the geopolitical tensions including Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Iran conflict and Israel and Gaza conflict, right? So these are the major geopolitical tensions that the world has been facing. However, despite all these global tensions, Indian economy has been performing better so far, right? So despite the trade wars, despite tariff revisions, and despite the geopolitical tensions, Indian economy has been fairly performing better. Now in this context, India must strategize to navigate the uncertainties. The key is how India can actually strategize to navigate these uncertainties which are existing, whether it is trade wars, tariff revisions, or the geopolitical tensions. And whatever the opportunities which exist for India, so India must leverage those opportunities so that India can be able to grow at a faster pace, and India's growth will also become a resilient growth. And we need to talk about the free trade agreements as well, right? So and a proactive trade policy that has been adopted by India. So both a proactive trade policy along with the free trade agreements by India and other countries will help India export its goods and will also help diversify its trade basket as well. And it will also help reduce the trade deficits of India with countries like China. However, the focus on India's free trade agreements and trade liberalization has become crucial for maintaining economic growth prospects, right? So the free trade agreements and trade liberalization as a policy approach that will be adopted by India has become a crucial for maintaining the economic growth prospects, right? So India must grow above 8% per annum. So more than 8% per annum to achieve its goal, its objective of becoming a developed country by the year 2047. However, so we'll understand the global shifts in trade dynamics. So how there have been major shifts that are reported across the globe. Now, we all knew that after Donald Trump being elected as the president of United States, there are trade wars and tariff reviews, tariff revisions, and those things have reshaped the global trade patterns. And this has also introduced volatility into the financial markets all across the world. Now, these factors have impacted the business confidence and the overall economic development all across different emerging markets. Now, when I say emerging markets, the Indian economy is considered as an emerging market. So therefore, these factors, the trade wars, revisions of tariffs and geopolitical tensions, so all these factors have impacted the business confidence first, second, the economic development in those emerging markets. And business confidence for attracting the foreign direct investment or for establishing the conducive business or investment climate. So that is very important to achieve economic growth. Now, when I say economic growth, we need to talk about employment prospects, right? So we need to talk about the employment prospects, social security, social safety nets, alleviation of poverty, education, healthcare. So all these factors would depend on the economic development, the level of economic development a country has achieved. And all these factors have led to a significant supply chain disruptions. Now, what does this supply chain disruptions actually mean? Now, resilience of supply chains is very important. Now, I would like to mention an example here. Now, imagine that India is known as a pharmaceutical hub of the world. India is a pharmaceutical hub of the world. However, despite India being a pharmaceutical hub of the world, India manufacture a huge chunk of medicines. But India depends on active pharmaceutical ingredients, and these active pharmaceutical ingredients or APIs are secured from or sourced from China. Now, if tomorrow China says that no, we will not supply the active pharmaceutical ingredients, then entire Indian pharmaceutical industry and its manufacturing come to a standstill. And that will lead to the supply chain disruptions, because we have been significantly or disproportionately dependent on China for securing the active pharmaceutical ingredients. So obviously that will result in the supply chain disruptions. So therefore, the supply chain resilience is very, very important. When you are sourcing raw material from only one country, there is a possibility of supply chain disruptions. So therefore, it is being suggested that you should widen the basket. You should have different alternatives to source the raw materials, and that is very important to achieve the supply chain resilience. I hope the first point is clear for you. And in recent times, we can also see that there is a rapid growth in the bilateral trade agreements, and there is a decline of World Trade Organization as well. And these factors have been creating the structural realignments all across the world. So therefore, India is also reassessing its trade policy, its engagement with the global supply chain ecosystems. Now, not just about the other countries, India itself is interested in bilateral trade agreements, whether it is the trade agreements with UK, UAE, Australia, and India is also looking to sign such a free trade agreement with European Union, Canada, and USA as well. So therefore, overall, it will result in structural realignment, and it will also compel India to reassess its overall trade policy and engagement. And in fact, United States is considered as India's largest export destination, right? And in fact, USA is one of the largest trade partners of India. So therefore, USA alone contributes nearly 1/5 of total merchandise exports. So USA alone contributes 1/5 of total merchandise exports from India. However, here the problem is that a tariff uncertainty that has been existing within the US. After Donald Trump become the president of US, there is a tariff uncertainty. So because of this tariff uncertainty, it will severely affect or impact India's merchandise exports to US market. So therefore, it has been highlighting that we should not just depend on one single country to export things, to export goods. Rather, we need to diversify the export destinations. That essentially means that we need to have the multiple alternatives, multiple options apart from US. Because 1/5 of the merchandise exports are to US markets. However, the problem is the tariff uncertainties. So therefore, what you have to do, you have to look for the alternatives and you start exporting those merchandise goods to other alternatives as well. So it will not affect your economy, even if there are tariff uncertainties which are existing. There are certain sectors such as marine products, apparel, gems, jewelry, auto companies, pharmaceutical and petroleum products. Now all these sectors, they highly dependent on the US market. So these are the sectors which are highly dependent on US market. So that means we have no alternatives apart from US for these product categories. So therefore, it has been facing severe risks from additional tariffs and the custom duties as well. And apart from that, businesses are also facing the rising costs, disrupted supply chains, because when there are supply chain disruptions, when, for example, in case a crude oil prices increased because of volatility in Middle East, because Middle East is the region which produces a huge amount of hydrocarbons. So because of instability or volatility, increased crude oil prices would substantially increase the cost of production. In case of supply chain disruptions, then also it will substantially increase the costs. And along with that, the asymmetric information that is already available. Now all these factors have been demanding an agile strategy shifts that could actually balance the immediate challenges with long-term opportunities in the context of evolving preferential trade agreements or free trade agreements. Now remember that India has been looking for free trade agreements with other countries, because a free trade agreements will help India achieve competitiveness. Free trade agreements will also allow the mobility of workforce or the labor force, mobility of the skills as well, and that is going to benefit India. So therefore, when India has been looking for a free trade agreement or preferential trade agreements, so these factors, the rising costs, disrupting supply chains, asymmetric information, so all these factors must be kept in mind. Now, what are the possible issues and uncertainties which are existing as of now? Now, we should also look at those issues and those uncertainties which have been impacting or affecting the Indian economy, or there is a possibility of these factors affecting the Indian economy. Now, the first factor is there is an uncertainty over the reciprocal tariffs. Particularly, this is from US. Now, what is a reciprocal tariffs? For example, one country imposes a tariffs on other country, and other country will also impose a certain quantity of tariffs on the country which has already imposed. So those tariffs are called as reciprocal tariffs. Now, for example, country A and country B, and country A has imposed tariffs on country B, and in return country B has also imposed some sanctions on country A. tariffs on country A. So in this case, we need to talk about the trade. So country A exports some goods to country B, and country B also exports some goods to country A. Now in this context, we need to take US and China as examples. So China exports a huge amount of manufactured goods into country A, that is US. Now US imposes tariffs, right? So US imposes tariffs on those goods, and again America also exports some goods into Chinese economy. Now China will also impose tariffs on those goods, and this is what is called as the reciprocal tariffs. And apart from that, there are pending legal challenges, potential interim deals. So all these factors have been, complicates the exporters, the market strategy, and limits accurate competitive assessments. So thereby it has been affecting the export growth and export competitiveness as well. Now, in order to increase exports from India, Indian goods need to be more and more competitive. Now, what does it mean when I say more competitive nature of Indian goods? For example, imagine that a plastic toy is made in India and a plastic toy is also made in China. And both India and China export this plastic toy to US economy. In US, a plastic toy made by India costs $2, right? So a plastic toy made by India costs $2 in US. However, a very same plastic toy made by China costs just $1 in US economy. So therefore, here it is being said that the Chinese goods are more competitive compared to the Indian goods, and that is what is called as the competitiveness of goods. If Indian goods are more competitive, there will be increased demand for Indian goods. Now, increased demand for Indian goods will boost exports from India. So if India is able to boost exports, then the current account deficit can be narrowed down, and in fact the current account surplus can also be achieved, and trade deficit can be minimized, and it will boost the manufacturing in India as well, and it will facilitate the FDI into Indian economy. It will create the gainful employment opportunities in India. So therefore, the export competitiveness is very, very important for sustaining India's growth and economic development. However, India's external economy, so we can say that it remains resilient, right? So why it remains resilient? Because in terms of service exports, right? So in terms of service exports, India's external economy, external sector, it remains resilient because we are getting higher remittances, higher service exports, and the foreign exchange reserves are also fair because we have almost like 700 billion US dollars of forex reserves, and comparatively we also have low current account deficit as well. Now, all these factors are the advantages that we have with respect to India's external economy, and this advantages are cushioning against the tariff impacts, right? So they are actually acting as a cushioning against the tariff impacts. However, monitoring the balance of payments and other economic indicators is very important for maintaining the economic resilience of India. Now, what is the balance of payments? So balance of payment is a country's total trade or total transactions with the rest of the world is considered as the balance of payments. So therefore, monitoring both balance of payment and other economic indicators is crucial for maintaining economic resilience. Here, Chinese and Asian economies, they may reroute surplus production to India. because as of now, both Chinese and Asian economies are known for their huge manufacturing capacities. So because of their manufacturing capacities, whatever produce that they have consumed and whatever amount of goods that they have exported, and the remaining goods are called as surplus, and that particular surplus would be rerouted into Indian markets, thereby dumping those goods into Indian markets. Whenever other countries' goods are dumped into Indian markets, so generally it will impact the domestic industries, because the dumped goods would be cheaper. So consumers would prefer to buy the cheaper goods compared to the domestically produced goods, which may not be cheaper. So thereby the dumping of goods made by other countries into Indian economy will severely affect the domestic industry, and it could even widen the trade deficit as well, right? So this is what we have with respect to China. So we have a huge trade deficit with China, and it is important to narrow the trade deficit with China. And this situation is further exacerbated by India's import dependency on the crude oil imports. Now it is being said that India has been importing around 85 to 90% of its total crude oil from other countries. So therefore, if in case instability in Middle East, in case of volatility, in case of increased crude oil prices, that has also been impacting our domestic industries and our economy as well. So therefore, it is very, very important for India to achieve self-sufficiency when it comes to the energy, or India needs to achieve the energy security. However, certain policy actions are needed to be taken to seize the opportunity. Now, what are the policy actions that India have to focus on? So, in early engagement, India's early engagement, particularly with respect to the bilateral trade agreement talks with US, because we wanted to have a free trade agreement with US. Even if not free trade agreement, we wanted to have a fair trade agreement with US, because with US we have been enjoying the trade surplus. We have been already enjoying the trade surplus. So because of that reason, a trade deal with US would potentially benefit India. And in fact, so whatever trade deal if India secures, so that will favor India, right? And in fact, it is going to safeguard the critical sector's interests as well, right? So the trade negotiations, trade talks with US should go on, should continue, because a potential trade deal between India and US will benefit India. And apart from that, as I have already told you, that service exports are very important, very crucial for India's external economy's resilience. So therefore, India needs to protect its strong service exports to US, right? And apart from that, the bilateral liberalization should further ensure minimal disruption while addressing critical non-tariff barriers. For example, there are certain things which might be considered as non-tariff barriers. For example, quotas, sanitary measures, phytosanitary measures, all these factors would be considered as part of the non-tariff barriers. So India's focus when it comes to its exports to other countries, particularly to reduce the non-tariff barriers. And along with that, there is a need to conclude a free trade agreement with more like-minded countries, particularly with countries where India would have a more competitive advantage. We have already seen that the free trade agreements have been signed with European Union, UK and Australia and other partners, and this, in fact, this will further diversify the market access for Indian goods, and it will also reduce dependency on any single bloc. if India depends on any single block, so that is not sustainable in the long term. So therefore, we must reduce dependency on any single block, and we must diversify the market access as well. So the free trade agreements should also consider the provisions for a double taxation avoidance. There is a need to prevent the double taxation avoidance because it facilitates investment. It ensures a conducive investment environment, conducive business environment, and it is also very, very important that the investment must be protected. So therefore, the free trade agreements that if India negotiates and signs with other countries, and that must have provisions for both double taxation avoidance as well as the investment protection. And in fact, the public capital expenditure is also a key factor that has to be kept in mind. And public capital expenditure must remain robust to maintain the domestic growth momentum. And in fact, construction of roads, construction of highways, and all other infrastructure projects, so they come under the public capital expenditure, and this public capital expenditure should remain robust so that it can continue maintain domestic growth momentum, and it will also attract the foreign direct investment despite a turbulent global conditions. And in fact, this might be considered as a key in improving the logistic performance and in fact the port infrastructure as well. In India, the problem is that high logistic costs compared to several developed countries and other developing countries such as China. So therefore, we need to improve our infrastructure to substantially reduce the logistic costs. And if we are able to reduce the logistic costs, that is an incentive for the investors, and they will come and invest in India. And we need to have a robust port infrastructure as well. So I hope you have understood this particular topic. So let's move on to the next important topic, which is the quantum communication. So we'll understand what exactly is a quantum communication and why it is in news. So it is in news because it is being said that India could achieve the quantum communication using satellite by 2030, according to IIT Delhi professor. So Professor Bhaskar Kanseri, so he projects that India could achieve satellite-based quantum communication within the next 5 years. So it showcases India's progress in cutting-edge technologies and even the potential for enhanced network-centric warfare capabilities. And this is very important that India is able to achieve the satellite-based quantum communication within next 5 years. And in fact, Bhaskar Kanseri and his team has achieved a quantum key distribution over 1 kilometer. And this has been achieved without having any cables. So it is the farthest in India so far, and thereby demonstrating a significant advancements in quantum technologies or quantum communication. However, scaling this further actually requires a funded multidisciplinary teams and startup collaborations, and therefore it has been highlighting the need for collaborative approach in India's quantum technology development. So this collaborative approach along with new startups and funding is very, very important to further scale up the quantum key distribution networking. So however, we'll understand how quantum communication actually works. Now, quantum communication usually have quantum keys, and these quantum keys are streams of photons, and they actually generate a secure quantum keys, right? So these secure quantum keys would ensure communication and thereby further ensuring unbreakable encryption, right? So the information can be passed from one place to another place, and this information is encrypted information. right? And in fact, the quantum communication is also works based on a technique called quantum entanglement. And in quantum entanglement, paired photons instantly reflect each other's state and alerting users to any hacking attempts, thereby providing a foundation for a secure network-centric warfare capabilities. So in fact, so it's all about sending information in a secured way, encrypted information, right? And transmission modes including fiber optic cables, because they can offer better stability, and free space transmission via satellites. And in fact, the free space transmission via satellites is ideal for the long distances, and it will also enable the global quantum communication networks as well. However, the quantum communication has been facing numerous challenges right now. So the challenges including the atmospheric disturbances, because they can increase the error rate in free space quantum communication. And similarly, stable fiber networks, they present obstacles for satellite based quantum communication. Now these are the major things based on which the quantum communication actually works. So in order to develop the quantum communication in India, the Union government has launched National Quantum Mission. So we'll be understanding about the National Quantum Mission. And in fact, the objective of National Quantum Mission is to put India among the top 6 leading nations involved in the research and development in quantum technologies, right? So therefore, presently, if we talk about the R&D work that has been carried out in quantum technologies, so it is currently being underway in countries like US, Canada, France, Finland, China, and Austria. Now coming back to National Quantum Mission, so the duration of the National Quantum Mission is 23-24 to 2030-31. And what is the nodal ministry of National Quantum Mission? For prelims examination, this might be important. The nodal ministry is Ministry of Science and Technology. Now what are the key highlights of the National Quantum Mission? And in fact, 4 thematic hubs will be developed in different domains all across the country as part of the National Quantum Mission. And in fact, wide-scale applications ranging from healthcare, diagnostics, defense, energy, and data security, all these factors would be considered, or they have the wide-ranging applications. And in fact, as part of the National Quantum Mission, so it will further strengthen the indigenously building quantum-based computers and help develop magnetometers with high sensitivity in atomic systems and atomic clocks, and support design and synthesis of quantum materials. So therefore, so these are the essential features of the National Quantum Mission, right? So the duration of National Quantum Mission is 23-24 to 2030-31. Now next, a very important topic is about Strait of Hormuz. Now Strait of Hormuz is a geographic area or region, and this is located in West Asia, and this is very important for prelims examination. And Strait of Hormuz in recent times continuously in news because of its geographical importance, its geopolitical, geoeconomic importance, and Israel-Iran tensions. So because of all these reasons, Strait of Hormuz is in news, and we'll be understanding about Strait of Hormuz in a much more detailed manner. Now the Strait of Hormuz is actually a narrow waterway. So this is a narrow waterway, and that is located west of Iran, right? So in fact, the Strait of Hormuz actually connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman. So I will actually show you where it is located. For example, this is India, right? So Pakistan and Iran, right? So this is like a Gulf of Oman, and this is Persian Gulf, and this place, so this is called as Strait of Hormuz, right? So this is Strait of Hormuz, right? So it connects the Persian Gulf with Gulf of Oman, and that will eventually leading to the Arabian. So this is all Arabian Sea, right? So this is all Arabian Sea that will eventually connect the Arabian Sea. And in fact, it also serves as a crucial maritime passage for oil exporting countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia and UAE, because so this is Saudi Arabia, and somewhere here there's a UAE, Oman also, and other countries such as Qatar, Bahrain are also located in this area, right? So therefore this Strait of Hormuz actually serves as a crucial maritime passage, and we can also call this as a choke point, maritime choke point, right? So in fact, it handles a significant portion of world's oil trade, and that is why it is significant, right? So Strait of Hormuz actually handles a huge quantity, a huge portion of the world's oil trade, and its location in the territorial waters of Iran and Oman adds to its geographical sensitivity. And this is in news in recent times because of Israel's attacks on Iran, followed by US attacks on Iran, and in fact recently Iran has decided to close the Strait of Hormuz, right? So you can see this is the area which can be considered as Strait of Hormuz, and this is Gulf of Oman and this is Persian Gulf, and it eventually opening into the Arabian Sea, right? So on the east of Persian Gulf is Iran, on the west of Persian Gulf is Saudi Arabia, and in fact within the Persian Gulf you can see this is Bahrain, this is Qatar, UAE and Oman, right? So Kuwait is also located within the Persian Gulf, and Iraq also located shares its borders with the Persian Gulf as well, because of all these Gulf countries, and these are the areas where a majority of the world's oil is produced, and that's why for oil shipping this area is very, very important, and this can also be called as a choke point, right? So when we talk about the geographical vulnerability of Strait of Hormuz, so Strait of Hormuz is actually the narrowest, right? So this is a very narrowest. The strait is just 33 kilometers wide. So the Strait of Hormuz is just 33 kilometers wide with a 3 kilometer wide shipping lane in each direction, right? And in fact this limited space within the Strait of Hormuz actually makes it highly vulnerable to the blockades or attacks on passing vessels, right? So there is a very high possibility of attacks on the vessels which have been passing through the Strait of Hormuz as well, because of its narrow nature. Now what is the significance of Strait of Hormuz? Now we need to understand the significance of Strait of Hormuz. Now Strait of Hormuz is considered as the world's most important oil and LNG transit route. So this is the most important oil plus LNG transit route. So according to some data, in 24-25, around 25% of a global seaborne oil trade and 20% of global oil and petroleum consumption actually passed through the Strait of Hormuz. So therefore you can imagine how important the Strait of Hormuz actually is. Now remember, for prelims examination the Strait of Hormuz is very, very important, right? So in fact additionally 20% of global LNG trade, that mainly from Qatar and it transited the strait, right? So around 20% of global LNG trade, mainly from Qatar, also transited this particular strait as well. Now, in fact, geographically, there is no direct sea route alternative to bypass the strait. Okay, so this is like closed one, right? So this is like a closed one, and that's why there is no alternative available, right? So there's no alternative, no direct sea route alternative that could actually bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Only Strait of Hormuz is the choice. There's no other option. And in fact, in case of any disruption, so that disruption would severely affect the global oil and gas flows as well. So imagine that there is a disruption or a blockade of Strait of Hormuz. So since around 25% of a global oil, gas, so just pass through this region, so that will immediately increase the crude oil prices all across the world, and that will further increases the inflation as well. So therefore it is actually having a huge problem, right? So it causes a sharp price hikes and broader inflationary impacts as well. Now, in this context, it is being said that Iran has been planning to block the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the blocking or disrupting the Strait of Hormuz could involve laying down sea mines, missile or bomb attacks on passing ships, detaining vessels, or launching cyber attacks on maritime systems, right? So this could be part of the blockade that might be planned by Iran. Now, what will be the strategic and diplomatic constraints for Iran? So we'll have to understand this. Now, despite repeated threats, Iran has never actually closed the strait, keeping the Strait of Hormuz and its importance for the global oil trade. Now, even during the wartime also, Iran never blocked or closed the Strait of Hormuz. And in fact, experts also say that it would harm Iran itself in case if Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz. So it affects Iran itself, right? So because Iran is itself a major oil producing country, and it also exports its oil to China. Now China is a most important customer for Iran, right? So therefore it can actually strain a recent diplomatic gains with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates as well, because here in this area Saudi Arabia and UAE also have important stakes. So their ships which have been carrying oil, they also passes through Strait of Hormuz. So in case if Iran go ahead and if Iran blocks this Strait of Hormuz, so that will also affect the diplomatic gains that Tehran has recently achieved with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Now, what are the global consequences of a blockade? So we'll have to understand this fact as well. So the blockade would not only disrupt the global energy markets, especially affecting China. So that actually sources around 47% of seaborne crude from Gulf region. Now, how it is going to impact India? So we'll have to understand this as well. Now, in fact, India is a third largest crude oil consumer, right? So it is world's third largest crude oil consumer, and India also significantly relies on imports of over 85% of its oil and 50% of natural gas. However, nearly 47% of India's crude imports transits through the Strait of Hormuz. So thereby the Strait of Hormuz is a lifeline for supplies from West Asian countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar and Oman, right? because of this reason, the Strait of Hormuz is also very important for India. In case of any blockade of Strait of Hormuz, that will significantly increase the energy prices in India, right? So the price volatility is the main risk that is associated with this, because India has a diversified oil sources, including India has been sourcing oil from Russia, US, Africa and Latin America. But the blockade of Strait of Hormuz, so that can actually disrupt the global supply chains, and it will also significantly increase the global oil prices, and that is also having its impact on Indian economy as well. So this in turn will cause oil and gas prices to spike even if availability is not immediately compromised. And in fact, a price increase would impact the trade deficit, forex reserves of India, rupee value, inflation. So thereby a stress on the entire economy and economic growth. So therefore, Strait of Hormuz is also very important for India and India's economic growth and other factors. Now the next important topic. So yesterday we have discussed that Israel attacked Iran. Now because of Israel-Iran tensions and the existential threat posed by the nuclear weapons of Iran, so in case if Iran acquires nuclear weapons, so because of this threat, US has attacked some nuclear facilities in Iran. Now Iran has been on its way to acquire nuclear weapons. So in order to do so, Iran has been enriching uranium. So therefore, Israel might be threatened by this, and US also threatened by this. And because of that reason, yesterday US bombed some nuclear facilities in Iran. So therefore, US officially enters a war between Israel and Iran, and US bombed Iran nuclear sites, right? So United States entered into Israel and Iran conflict, and USA has bombed 3 Iranian nuclear facilities using advanced B-2 stealth bombers and bunker busting bombs, including strike on the heavily fortified Fordo uranium enrichment plant. Now, in order to develop nuclear plants, nuclear weapons, uranium has to be enriched, right? So highly enriched uranium is used to make nuclear weapons. However, since Iran has been planning to have nuclear weapons, and USA has attacked the Fordo uranium enrichment plant in Iran. Now you can see here, this is the map of Middle East, and within the Middle East, Iran is located. In Iran, USA has carried out its attacks on Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan, right? So these are the 3 places where USA has carried out strikes using B-2 bombers, right? So this is how the B-2 bombers actually look like, right? So this is B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, right? So you can see a satellite image shows craters at Iran's Fordo facility after US strikes. Now one thing that we should understand, that as of now Israel don't have the capacity to attack the nuclear installations in Iran, because these nuclear installations or uranium enrichment plants in Iran are located deep underground. So therefore, Israel as of now, they don't have the capacity, and that's why USA has intervened. USA has attacked these nuclear facilities which are located in Iran, right? Now you can see here, so the Fordo uranium enrichment plant. So this is Iran's heavily fortified nuclear site, and this is used for uranium enrichment, which is built deep beneath a mountain. And Natanz, this is the largest uranium enrichment facility in Iran. And Isfahan, so this is Iran's largest nuclear research site, which was targeted by Israel 2 times since the crisis began on June 13. Right? So therefore, the plan is to make Iran don't develop nuclear weapons. So Iran should not have the nuclear weapon capabilities. Now, what are the key takeaways from US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities? Now, US President Donald Trump has announced military strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan. And in fact, these strikes are conducted using a full payload of bombs, and it makes US entry into the ongoing Israel and Iran conflict. Now, in fact, it is being said that after these strikes carried out by US on nuclear installations in Iran, US-Israel alliance has reached new heights, because the US has transitioned from support to a direct military involvement in Israel's offensive against Iran. So earlier, US used to support indirectly to Israel, but now US directly attacked Iran using B-2 bombers. So therefore, there is a strategic shift in US approach in Middle East. Previously, US used to offer intelligence defense assistance. Now, US now demonstrate the ironclad support through direct strikes, reinforcing Israel's claims that Iran poses an existential nuclear threat. And in fact, this is also a shift from Trump's no endless war doctrine, because Trump wanted to play the role of peacemaker in conflicts throughout the world, right? So President Trump, who campaigned against US involvement in foreign wars, and he also promised a military restraint if he voted to power as the president of United States. And in fact, it is said that he has taken a stark turn by ordering strikes on Iran. And this actually contradicts his long-standing position, including his pledge to end the Ukraine conflict within 24 hours and also to avoid entanglement in the Middle East. Right? So I hope you have understood this, and that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you like a lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.